How's it going, guys? We've got episode 2 of the new series that I've started here on YouTube coming right up. Caleb Serong. Stay tuned. What's up, YouTube? Thanks for tuning in for episode 2 of this newish series, kind of a run on the Doctor's Daily Dose that we run in our Patreon most seasons, which we are unfortunately missing this year. Now, episode 1 was on Tom Green. If you haven't watched that already, that is on the channel, so make sure you go check that out. Episode 2, we're going to stay in the midfield and we're going to talk about Caleb Serong. So a lot of people talking about Caleb, and he's owned by about 10% of the competition, so 1 in every 10 teams. I should really become a mathematics channel at this point. Let's get into some of the interesting stats. So this is 4th year, as we can come here and have a look at his seasons to date. 4th year, and as you can see, his 3rd year comparatively to his 4th was a huge explosion, increased his average by about 20 points per game. He did lock himself in as Fremantle's best or number 1 midfielder, especially in terms of SuperCoach scoring. He overtook Brayshaw last year, and as you can see, it's been a bit of a, I wouldn't say slow build. I think just starting at such a high floor of 81, you can see that he's had the pedigree from day one. And then from 81 to 83, small improvement, up to 90, threatening to jump straight into 111. So can he do it again? Does he have the ability to go higher again? I think he does, but let's discuss in a moment. The other thing that we've noticed with Caleb Serong is that he had 41 free kicks for last year and just the 12 against. That is unbelievable numbers, especially for someone who tackles 5 times a game. To only give away 12 free kicks for the entire season, you would think that either this has some room to move, maybe that sort of averages out a little bit more, or he's just one of the better tacklers in the game, which is obviously also has potential to be true. So that's why it's an interesting stat, not something that we can pin down as something that could potentially change or be weighted in a certain direction the following season, but definitely something to note. Now, let's get into the positives for Caleb Serong. We start off, he averaged 30 disposals per game at 82% CBAs per game. So there is room to grow with that. A lot of players, 30 touches per game, he could definitely increase that by 1 or 2 and get into the sort of more, it's already elite numbers, but he could lift that to the uber elite numbers. And 82% CBAs, it's a lot, but some of the premier midfielders, a lot of the premier midfielders in the competition rely on higher percentages because he's only on for 103 minutes on average per game. And I love looking at this stat because it's a real indicator as to if someone builds their tank up, they could threaten to just go that next level higher. So from the 80 to the 111, there's obviously a lot holding him back at that point, but from the 90 to the 111, you look at it and go, where can he improve? Disposal efficiency, actually getting his disposal numbers up. He could tackle more in those years, etc. Looking at it from post jump, so you've seen the disposal numbers jump. His disposal efficiency isn't perfect. He could definitely help and definitely fix that a bit. But minutes per game is an intangible that you just need to be fitter. You need to stay on the ground for longer. And that's not something that, if someone's not a great disposer of the football, the odds of that drastically changing from the 4th to the 5th season, not that high. It happens, but it's not that high. Can someone go from 103 minutes per game to, say, 108? Absolutely possible in one full preseason. If they're obviously applying themselves and trying to improve their fitness, you could absolutely see that happening. So let's apply the 108 barrier to Caleb Serong here and see what we come up with. So in games that he played 108 or more minutes, you have 113 against the Bulldogs in round 6 for a score of 130. You have Sydney and Geelong in back-to-back rounds, 9 and 10 for a 120 and a 135. You have Richmond for a 108 with 114 minutes there. And then none others for the rest of the season. So we're going to talk about his injury in a moment, but that might have held him back later here in the season. As you can see, the numbers weren't getting as high, but he did have a stretch there where he was starting to threaten to get bigger minutes per game. So that could potentially be room for improvement as well. I think that could definitely offer for some room to improvement. Now, as we can see here, he is extremely consistent. I don't know what screen people prefer to look at, but if we've got a fan footy here, I love giving them shout outs because they do God's work. He is extremely consistent. He had a 70 in round 1 in which he was tagged. Then you have to go all the way to round 11 for the next sub time, which is a 90. Round 14 he scored an 84. Round 17 he scored a 90, and then he had back-to-back 97, 94 in round 22 and 23 to finish the season, prior to the big ton in the final round of the year. So 16 tons and only 2 scores sub 90, one of which was tag affected. That counts as one of the most consistent players in the game. And if he just lifts that ceiling a little bit higher, so instead of the 138, 140, 135, he had a couple of 146s. Instead of getting the middling, 120, 104, 101, 110, if those numbers start lifting, a 97 to a 105, if the minutes improve, the tank improves, those numbers start going up a bit. Natural progression as well, of course. That's when we can see him really breaking into the 115 plus average mark. I think he definitely has the talent to do that, whether that's this year or in the coming seasons, to be seen. But let's talk about the next obvious positive, and that he has the round 13 bye, which only Fremantle and Port Adelaide have. Both Fremantle and Port Adelaide, they don't play in round 0, whatever we're calling it, opening round. So they don't have the early bye, and they also have the best bye in the game. So if you find a way to get yourself out of a full team of 20 in the round that Port and Fremantle only have the bye, then I'll be quite impressed. You'll probably have about 4 players on each side. Having said that, the bye is hard to quantify. What does that mean, having Serong for that bye? Why does that mean that he's a better starting pick? It might not. It might mean he's someone to upgrade to. It might mean that he's someone that you want off of that bye. If you're set up well for the first bye as well, then you can go 1-1-1. You're probably going to want to do an upgrade after that second bye as it is. So now this gives you an excuse. All right, well, I'll see what Serong does until then. I might be forced to pick him up earlier, or I could wait until post bye. Obviously, just starting him gives you more flexibility on which players from which bye you trade in during the season, because you've got a guy locked in that you're not going to have trouble with in that bye round. So I find that one a little bit hard to quantify, but it literally cannot be a negative having that bye and starting them. So it goes in the positives. Next, we talk about the ankle injury. I spoke about that earlier, that he carried through the latter parts of the season. His post-bye average, so his bye was around 12 by the looks of this, was 108. So that's when you see a couple of his lower scores here. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sub-tons in that time, and a few of the lower ones, the 101, the 104. You could see he was struggling post-bye with that ankle injury. So usually when we do these, it's what did he average injured and what did he average without the injury, and you can see a clear difference there, and that is why a player's offer value. With this one, he played through it. He got jabs, he got whatever it took to play on game day. It's great that he played through it for those who owned him, but it sort of misrepresents the end to the season that he had. Even having said that, the consistency still stayed, so he still put up really good consistent numbers. So I think it is a positive, because without the ankle injury, if he had have gone 110, 112, whatever he was doing earlier in the year, we could see a SuperCoach average of closer to 115, which is probably more of a deserving outcome for his season. Now, that's a lot of positives. What are the negatives with Caleb Serong? Will he start to be tagged? Now, we saw it once last season, just the once, which was in round 1. The tag proved quite effective, keeping him to 70 SuperCoach. He still got 29 touches, but just the one tackle had someone hanging off of him all game. I think it was Bytel, potentially. Yep, tag by Bytel. Just for the 70 SuperCoach. Could that happen more often? As we said, he has seemed to have jumped Brayshaw a little bit, but who's seen as more damaging of those two? Obviously, the potential is there. I don't like to make picks just based on tags, but the potential is definitely there. It would be silly to just completely ignore that altogether. The big one for me is that the Fremantle midfield this year, I've never had more question marks on it. So we've got Serong and Brayshaw. Those two guys locked in. They're great. Hayden Young. Okay, well, the way he finished the year last year, he's trained as a midfielder all season. This season, you would expect him to be locked in as well. So that's your 3 main guys, right? Nat Fyfe, apparently training the house down in the midfield. This could change in 2 weeks' time, and we could be talking about how Nat Fyfe isn't in there anymore, so Serong's safer. But Nat Fyfe at this point is in that midfield, and pretty well locked into that midfield, you would think, with the reports that are coming out. So they've got 4 guys that are apparently going to play a hefty chunk of midfield. Where does this leave Serong? The minutes per game might increase, but do the minutes forward increase? Do the minutes on the wing increase? Not entirely sure. So we could have a bit of a weird situation where we do see the improvement that we want, but it actually doesn't come with the scoring, because the improvement is he's moved into other areas, and that's how he improves his minutes per game. I don't think that's completely likely. I think maybe Brayshaw is the one that gets moved out wide a little bit more, but it's definitely something that you can't rule out at this stage. Lastly, where do you think Fremantle are going to finish? How many midfielders in the bottom, we'll say 10, so not making the top 8? How many of them can go 105 plus? Is the SuperCoach pie big enough? We talk about this all the time, the 3,300 points that are allocated. The team that he plays for, if they're losing more games than they're winning, you often see a positive split in wins and losses. As we see here, 10 wins, 12 losses, 119 in the wins, 104 in the losses. Do we see that drastically changing? Do we see them getting better or worse this year? Personally, I don't mind Fremantle's list, but a lot of people are tipping them in that bottom 8, bottom 10, sorry. A lot of people are tipping them in the bottom 8 as well. So where do you think they end up? Because if you think they end up losing more games than they win, then there is a good chance that you see Serong for cheaper than 620k. The last thing I'll talk about, which isn't even on my little cheat sheet here, is if we filter by midfielders, where does Serong fit in this mix? You've got Bontempelli, who you would expect to be higher. Oliver, when he gets his act together and gets on the footy field, you would expect to be better. Same with Petrarca. A lot of people have Laird higher. Zach Merritt is going to be a very popular post-buy if you look at their fixture run. Liberatore, people are sort of projecting he might fall back a bit. How far back? Jordan Dawson, I think people are super positive on. Dunkley, you could say, is too injury prone to consider heavily. Butters and LDU, I think they're absolutely safe and settled. Golden, and then you look at Serong, who's in that mix as well. Tom Green, people are projecting gets better. Brayshaw's end to the season was incredible. The names go on. Walsh, do people expect him to go back to his 117 plus days? With all these names getting mentioned, where does he fit in this mix? Where do we fit Caleb Serong? If you can name 8 guys that you think are going to average higher than him, is the buy really worth it? Is the price tag really worth it? Do you think he maintains at 650k for most of the season? I think he's got enough lower ton scores to potentially hit that 600k flat mark for a sustained period at some point in the season. So is he good value for money? Only if you really, really want that buy. So I think it's very interesting. I don't think he's a bad pick by any stretch of the imagination, but is he a sexy pick? Is he a pick that is going to blow everyone else away? Is he going to price other players out? I also don't think he does that. So currently not in my team, but has been tinkered in and out a lot this preseason. That's going to do it on Caleb Serong. Let me know down below, are you considering Caleb Serong in your starting team? Why not? Have you had him in? Have you had a majority out of the side? Has this video changed your mind at all? Were any of these facts something that you had or hadn't considered in the past? Please let me know down below. Please leave a like and a subscribe. I do say this at the end of the video. I don't want to pester people at the start, but it does help an incredible amount as I tried to build up this YouTube channel pretty much. Hopefully getting more towards 3 or 4 videos per week in the preseason. We can only do that if you keep supporting the channel with likes and subscribe. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and the next episode is coming just around the corner. Another midfielder, I believe.